thank you for coming in. The Columbian Editorial Board is pleased to welcome Congresswoman Jaime Herrera Beutler, representative of Washington's 3rd Congressional District. And I'm sorry, Angie, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Angie Reister, Communications Director for Jaime.
Right here.
Hey.
I didn't want to be in the shot.
Be in the shot.
Okay.
Be in the shot.
You're on camera now.
No.
The cheese is not stands alone.
I'm from Portland, so local.
Oh, wait. Got adopted. Southwest Washington. That
Yeah,
we,
I've had to
we
warm
hired
up.
her in
I've
spite
had to
of.
warm up. Yeah.
No, well, thank you for coming in. As you know, I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor here, and I believe you met the other board members. And also, reporter Katie Sword is sitting in on this meeting. She won't be asking questions in this forum, but might want to speak with you afterwards.
Yeah, I think we have time.
And you've been through the drill. As you know, we're videotaping this, and we will post it unedited on our website for the benefit of our readers. So, again, thank you for coming in. I know it's been very busy in Washington, D.C., and did you just come back yesterday? Okay. Well,
Yes. Fortunately, I am up time zone wise. So if this had been in the afternoon, it would have been a problem. But
That's right.
I'm
This
still
is
okay.
the middle of your day.
It's the right direction.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so a lot of things we can and will talk about, but I would like to start with, we tried to get together a couple of weeks ago, and understandably you've been busy, and but Congress passed and the President signed a tax reform bill, and could you tell us why you supported that?
Oh, I am excited about this bill. And I don't get terribly excited about a lot of stuff that comes out of Washington, D.C., just because I've been around the block a couple times. But I am, nothing's perfect, but this is one of those times where I feel lucky to have been a part of this Congress to help craft this bill, because it's going to benefit people in Southwest Washington. And it's going to benefit people across the spectrum, from that single mom who's living paycheck to paycheck, to the small business owner, the middle income family, and anybody who is working and living and endeavoring to survive here and thrive, really. So it's the average family, the average middle income family in Southwest Washington will see about $2,600 increase in their pay. The average middle to lower income family in Southwest Washington is going to see about at least $2,300 in savings federally. At the same time, we're going to see faster wage growth. The state economist just released his report saying that we're going to see 20,000 new jobs in Washington state as a result of the tax cut bill. In addition, I think we're already seeing it now. It's January. I didn't actually think we would start seeing some of this until, a month or 2 or 3 into the year, but we're already seeing businesses compete for workers. And it's not, some of these are entry-level jobs, some of these are higher, more skilled jobs, but it's really across the spectrum. And that's what's exciting to me, because when you say to a business owner, go for it, expand your business, what they're doing now is they're putting pay increases and bonuses, and they're investing capital to compete. I did an event 2 nights ago, and I had a small business owner. He said, I've got 12 employees. I have a board of 5 people, and I had to go to my board to ask permission to give my employees a $3 pay increase just to keep them. That's just to keep them right now. And we saw, I think it was today or yesterday, Starbucks announced, it's going to full benefits, even for its baristas, including paid family leave. I mean, that's amazing. Those are things in the last 8 years. There were several times when we were working on different pieces, like how do we make it so that millennials who generally both have to work can go to work and their kids can be taken care of, right? How do we address healthcare benefits? How do we get people's pay to increase? And if you think the last 8 years, who's had a real pay increase? I mean, yes, costs have started to go back up in terms of energy and healthcare and food, and right, but people's pay haven't gone up. And we've been trying, everything we could with the Obama administration and the Republican Congress, how do we get to that? And we've had very little success. But by really taking, it's not just a tax cut, by totally transforming the tax code, the incentives and the infusion that's going to allow more innovation, we're already seeing pay increases. We're already seeing benefits becoming more robust, because employers are recognizing, hey, we got to take care of our employees if we want to keep them, and they're our business. So I think that's what we've seen so far, and it's January.
Okay, and I'm sorry,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
get into some specifics
Let's
about
do it.
that. So people in Southwest Washington will see pay increases or tax cuts. There will be
Both.
less taken out.
Both.
So let's talk about the tax cuts.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Does that not increase the deficit?
Well, it means it's definitely, if you're keeping more of your money and not sending it to Washington, D.C., then yes, the federal government has less money to spend. Absolutely. But this is the
Where are those
fundamental.
cuts going to come?
Well, let me explain.
Go ahead.
Because there's two philosophies here, right? For the last 8 years, we've tried the government spends your money. That's how we bring down the deficit and grow jobs in the economy. And my question isn't even to the editorial board; it's to the folks in this area. Has that worked for your paycheck? Has that worked for your investments? Has your IRA gone up? Have you seen more competition? Have employers been fighting for you, or have you been fighting to keep your job? The other the other philosophy, and this is the one I subscribe to, is if you keep your money, yes, the federal government won't have it, right? Yes, that means there's less money coming into the federal coffers right now, right, as a result of that money staying with you. But I believe in using the dynamic scoring model, which the Joint Tax Foundation, JTC, Joint Tax Committee uses, which allows us to say, okay, so what's going to happen now that money isn't coming to Congress, right? There's a hole there. What's going to happen? I've seen, and I've seen it from analysts. I've seen it from nonpartisan economists. I've seen it from here in Washington State. I've seen it from think tanks in D.C. Because that money is being given to you, you're keeping it. You're as a business owner, as an individual, you're going to spend it, you're going to save it, or you're going to invest it, right? And in each of those ways, we can see economic growth. We're seeing it happen now.
Okay.
And so wait, no, I need to finish this because this is critical. So they say there'll be about $1.5 trillion
Where's that gonna
deficit
come from?
over the $10 billion. It's going to people are keeping it, they're not paying it. How do we backfill it, I think is your question. Is how do we cover that hole, right? Economic activity, 1% growth, right? We're expecting, that's like the most cautious estimate. I've seen upwards of 3% growth. But if we have a 1% increase in economic growth, 1% over the next 10 years, we'll more than fill that hole. And this isn't just me, right?
No, well, let's see. The Tax Policy Center, the Tax Foundation, the Penn Wharton Budget Model, and the Joint Committee on Taxation all say it will increase the deficit by more than $1 trillion over 10 years. That philosophy, the tax cuts will pay for themselves, is that not what Ronald Reagan tried in the 80s? And Republicans still cling to the notion that that was a huge success. But Reagan then raised taxes 11 times, mostly by closing loopholes, and the deficit still tripled under him. Where is the evidence that this works? This has been a Republican mantra for 30 years.
It is, and I'll claim it. I'll take it.
Okay,
because
you're going to own it.
I believe it.
That.
I will own it. Because I believe that the average person in our area is going to see a benefit. And that's a risk I'm willing to take. Because guess what? 1% weak, anemic growth isn't good enough for the people I serve. It's not good enough for my family. I don't want them to grow up here thinking, gosh, man, it used to be nice when we saw, our IRA increase. IRAs in the last year have gone through the roof. That didn't happen under Obama's policy.
Actually, it did. The stock market increased just as much under Obama as it has under Trump. And those 401ks are tied to the stock
I disagree, and I can provide numbers to show you.
Well, as can I.
So then we're going to have to agree to disagree on that piece. But let me finish. This is critical.
Speaking about tax cuts, so did not Bush try this? And within a couple of years, he
did tax cuts.
Yes,
he didn't reform the tax code.
Okay,
he gave everybody like a refundable tax. I think, right? It's very different. We completely changed the tax code. So if you're a small business, if you're a big business, if you're a medium-sized business, if you're an entrepreneur, you're paying totally different rates. And we are already seeing those businesses invest in capital, both human and physical. That means things are going to be made and sent and distributed. That's economic activity.
Okay, and your office, following this, sent out, Boeing announced some bonuses.
Boeing, Alaska Airlines, Starbucks, Home Street Bank.
Let's start with Boeing. Boeing, in 2013, was handed an $8.7 billion tax break from the state on their state taxes. That wasn't enough to get them to invest and pay workers more?
So, I I wasn't involved in the state policy.
I know you
I haven't
weren't,
been a
but
state
they're
lawmaker
all-
since 2007. I can
Right.
speak to federal policy right now with regard to what's happening
Right.
and what we're seeing across
well,
the
let's
nation.
talk some more about Boeing. And one of the arguments in favor of the tax cut that was just passed is that corporate tax rates are exceedingly high in the U.S.
They're the highest in the industrialized world
Okay.
by like 10 to 15%.
Are there loopholes that reduce what companies pay?
There were. That was the
Yeah.
point, is we wanted to
Right.
get rid of those loopholes and make it fair.
Okay. So Boeing, because they're getting this huge tax break from the state, then we know what their tax filings have been. We have access to that information. Over the past 15 years, Boeing paid federal taxes of 4% on profits. You really think they needed more of a tax cut? And now with the state tax cut, or the state tax break starting in 2013, their state tax bill is essentially zero. So did Boeing really need more of a tax
Look,
cut?
I'm not for or against Boeing as a
Neither
corporation.
am
It sounds like you're against them, but that's
I'm
that's
against
fine.
them receiving more tax cuts.
That's fine. I have zero preference in that department. You know what I care about? The 750 people who in our region work for Boeing. Guess what? They're getting pay increases. They're getting more training. They're getting more workforce opportunities. And for crying out loud, there's about $100 million more going to charity. That's going to spur personal ownership, decision making. So rather than the government saying, this is how we're going to spend your money, we know best, I as a mom get to decide this is how we're going to spend my money, because it's more of it's coming to me. And look, you obviously don't agree with the Bush tax cuts, and you didn't like the Reagan tax policy because he did more of a reform. Bush did a
Right.
cut, right? So I don't know if it's fair to look at the Bush stuff and say, well, that spurred or changed much. In fact, he added more to the debt than he should have. It was ridiculous. Obama added more than all 8 presidents before him combined.
Right.
So,
Well,
right.
and-
So
and-
it's funny to hear all these people going, deficits, when there was no plan to raise the capital to change that, right, other than just taxing people. Our plan to fill in that hole is economic activity. I want people making things here, growing here. I want more jobs here. All the repatriation that's already being announced in January means more things are going to be built here in the United States. Our jobs that have been offshored are coming back. More people are going to have the freedom not just to stay in a minimum wage job. Thank you, great, a minimum wage. That gets you nowhere. What I want is someone to say to that employee, you're so valuable, I'm not going to let minimum wage be your ceiling. I'm going to raise your rates. I want you to stay with me. That's what we're seeing happen in January.
Okay, you mean, for instance, Walmart, which made a big deal out of raising its minimum wage to $11 an hour, which is still below the Washington state minimum wage. And they made a big deal out of that, but did not make a big deal out of announcing they were closing 38 Sam's Clubs the same day, which affects 9,000 jobs.
So I guess
So AT&T made a big deal out of bonuses. Oh, and Walmart gave $1,000 bonuses to employees who have been there 20 years or more. How many people have been at Walmart 20 years?
look, I'm
So
not against
AT&T
Walmart. I'm not against AT&T
I'm not
or
either.
Comcast.
But do these giant corporations really need tax cuts?
Here's the point. We closed their loopholes so that they're not the only people using the tax policy. The way that our tax code was set up, it's if you're a big corporation, you figure out how to wind your way, because you have these huge legal teams, through all the tax code, and you basically can not extort, but you can make it to where you're benefiting and your small to medium-sized businesses are going to go nowhere. Right? They all figured out to go into different countries where the taxes were better. All these big multinationals did. That's not why I did this. I did this so that, like I said, the Vancouver business owner who has 12 employees had to go to his board and say, we're giving him a $3 an hour raise just to keep him. We're now seeing this across the board. That's how widespread this tax reform is. Every American will see their taxes, their federal taxes. Yes, businesses are also going to now be competitive. It's the OECD, it's an organization of industrialized countries who keep track, and it's a nonprofit trying to help them grow economically. It's Germany, Sweden, France, Canada. Out of the 35 countries, 33 have done this with their corporate taxes or similar in the last 15 years. Every single one of them has lower tax rates than us, except for one, Chile, and they already had lower ones. So we were just hanging out here with this the tax code that penalized success essentially, and changing this to where we're now on par. We're now doing what the rest of the world, including more liberal countries like Germany and Sweden, are doing. Canada, for example, they went through this 18 years ago. In 2000, they had this exact debate, this discussion. You know, we have this high corporate tax rate. Should we lower it? And you can imagine that was a pretty fervent debate. Well, today, they look back 15 or so years later, they have more than taken care of the tax hole that you're talking about, the deficit that they gave away. They have made more in tax revenue than the United States. That's because they're spurring growth.
But so do you think that this tax cut will pay for itself?
Over time, yes. And it's not because it's a tax cut. Well, we're using it, the numbers I use are a 10-year window. And if we get another point in economic growth in that 10 years, right? So we're at 1.5 to 1.9.
Many analysts say we'll add more.
Just as many say that we will pay for this, right? So we're going to have to come to a draw on this unless we want to break out every single one.
Let's say that it doesn't.
Well, let me finish the sentence. I believe it will. In fact, I have hard numbers that show that we can pay for the hole that you're talking about and then have a higher economic growth. And it's not crazy. So like Reagan did this, and in that time, I was 8 years old, so I'm not going to speak to the current world events at the time, but I can tell you now the history that's come from that. Because of, I believe, what he did, Clinton, along with the Republican Congress, finally for the first time had surpluses. They were able to balance the budget. So at the time there was this huge debate about, we're going to have this deficit. But if you fast forward to 2000, the 90s, late 90s, when Clinton was in office, he came to an agreement, and they were able to, with the surpluses, with the excess revenue coming in, they balanced the federal budget. That's where I think we're going to go with this.
Well, one, there was a precedent in between Reagan and Clinton in which things went south, and that's why he was a one-term president. And then two, Clinton, in some ways, actually raised taxes. And so
the balanced budget that he put together with the Republicans was not a tax raise. It was because they had enough money to put things in place and prioritize. And I think we're going to get there. I do. And you said, look, you're going to own it. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm excited. I'm excited that this even people who don't pay taxes are going to get money back.
In any business, you need contingency plans. Let's say this doesn't make up the deficit. Then what happens? Do we just allow the debt to continue to grow? And Obama should have addressed that late in his term when things got better.
I feel like Obama should have done a lot of things, but we see the world differently, him and I. Look, let's do our budget window with this bill, and if we see no benefit, then I'm not wed to this policy. It's not an ideological
then
policy.
What do we do? What do we change if this?
Well, tell me what the situation is.
The situation
you fast forward 5 years and tell me where we're going to be.
Okay,
and then we can talk specifics about what we'll do.
Then the debt is. This has added another $1 trillion to the debt.
And we've seen no growth. We've seen nothing that chips away at that.
Regular growth, average
1.5.
Yeah.
Because typical and annual now is not good enough. I want to get back to what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we won't get to our glory day of 3.3%, but we can sure as heck not hover around 1.5.
Yeah, agree.
And this is going to change. It's changing now as a result of this tax reform bill. And if in 5 years we turn around and we say, holy cow, I was wrong. Boy, I've been wrong many a time, right? I'm not perfect. I was wrong. I have no problem going in there and saying, okay, this has to change. We have to fix this because I do believe in that trajectory changing. You're asking me to describe what a purple unicorn is going to look like in my dream.
The reason I ask,
I have to know what the context is.
The reason I ask is because, for example, Marco Rubio, Republican senator from Florida, said you also have to bring spending under control and not discretionary spending. That isn't the driver of our debt. The driver of our debt is the structure of Social Security and Medicare for future beneficiaries.
I have long...
Paul Ryan said we're going to have to get back next year at entitlement reform, which is how you tackle the debt and the deficit, on and on. So critics, and I'm not saying I subscribe to this, I'm critical of some aspects of it, but some critics have said this is a ploy by the Republicans to give them an excuse to cut Medicare Social Security.
I think that is political cynicism and fear-mongering at its worst. I mean, if you believe, which I do, in protecting the trust funds, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, And they require different, I think they require each of them a specific plan, right? If you believe in protecting them and making sure that people who rely on them don't have the rug pulled out, then you have to get our debt and our spending under control. And so as an appropriator, and most of my time has been here under the Obama administration, and most of his legacy was to try and, his philosophy was government spending is going to stimulate the economy. That's what he subscribed to. We went in, and in the last, 6 years or so, we've cut over $1 trillion in spending on the non-trust fund side, right? Areas where I felt like there was overspending or duplicative services, and some of it wasn't even bad stuff, right? Some of it was stuff that, hey, how could you be against that? It's just we didn't have the money, right? It's just a budget. We can only do so much. I will say in that time period, though, we've increased spending over $1 billion for NIH and healthcare. Like we also have plussed up things, but we've cut fat, I feel like, almost to the bone. That's a piece of it. Another piece is just to have, it's not about how much I'm going to tax you versus you versus you. It's, I want more taxpayers. That means everybody's share is going to be less, right? Many hands make light work. In addition, it's making sure that we don't allow health systems to bilk Medicare. We quit paying people Social Security payments when they're dead, right? We quit sending out IRS returns to fraudulent. I mean, it's upwards of 10 billion. I mean, the numbers are astounding, 10 to 20 billion, right? So there's pieces of that. And I also believe if you look at Medicare in and of itself, and I've subscribed to this in the past, the numbers have not changed. In order to protect Medicare for people who are on it or about to go on it, right? People who are near retirement, right? The next generation, people my age need to have more options with Medicare. Meaning we should have the right to choose a type of Medicare Advantage plan or traditional Medicare. If we simply add that option with people who have years till their retirement, right, my generation, we can save this program. So I believe in doing that. That doesn't mean throwing grandma out on the street, right? It's actually the opposite. It's protecting grandma so that it doesn't break on her. Medicaid's another piece. This is one of the reasons I'm fervent about repealing the ACA. Because rather than provide decent health solutions across the board, and I believe in a free market approach versus a government-run approach. It's really, you're seeing the same thing on the tax side, right? In the same approach on the healthcare side. There was about 800,000 or so people in Washington state who got into the ACA. Over 600,000 of those people got put onto Medicaid, which has meant, so Medicaid before all of this was in the 10-year or so budget window of going bankrupt, right? We already weren't handling well. I can't, right? It is so poorly kept at the state level. I can't tell you how many children get Medicaid services for disability. I can't break any of that down. They don't even keep the records. They just pay it. It's a ridiculous system. So now we added 600,000+ adults to that, right? And those folks who were poor, single, have kids, or poor children, it just watered that whole pot down. And now in Clark County, you guys have run stories on this. There was a family who adopted a kid that had Medicaid, and the mom's quote was, "Insurance is nice, but we need doctors." Right? Doctors aren't taking this anymore. So there are a lot of things, full circle back, we have to do to protect the trust funds. And I believe in safety nets.
That doesn't mean cutting them, as some people fear.
No, there's nothing in this bill that cuts them. No,
not in this bill, but down the road.
No, I think we need to, I do think we need to change it for people my age, right? I mean, I think we need to give people who have a running start a chance to change it up. But we can do that in a fair way. We really can. You know, I have agreed with Paul Ryan on a lot of stuff. I've disagreed with him on a lot of stuff. I think he's learned a lot this year about, those people who rely on some of these programs, right? Who they are, what they need, and how we need to move forward in a way that respects their humanity, as well as respects the fact that as much as I'd love to make sure everybody had everything, I just don't have the power to do that. So there are some realities. And I think he's come full circle. You know, he's talked about, some of what he's talked about I agree with, and some of it I don't. But if at the end of the day we can get to the point where these trust funds are preserved and people's the promise was kept, right, then I think we've done what we needed to do. But hey, things will change. it's the world's changing. Nothing's static.
Do you think people have a legitimate fear that that will not be protected? That
No,
those
yeah.
programs
So let
are
me
going to be
say it this
cut?
way. The amount of people, the liberal industrial complex that makes money off of scaring seniors. Oh my goodness! I get so many phone calls from people who say, "I just got this mailer. They said you're going to do this. Is this true?" And they ask for money. I could build a company on weeding these people out. What they're talking about? No, absolutely not. Will it change? I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. We're not changing it now. It's not something we're talking about. But I think 20 years from now, will it look different for people from my generation? I think it will. But it can still be there if we protect it. And that's what I think, I think the other side really wants to twist that and say, well, that means she's going to throw grandma off a cliff. Good grief. I mean, I guess it's easy to pay someone in D.C. 20, or maybe an older white guy, right? Paint him as heartless. But which I don't think is fair just because of what he looks like. But I think that's one of the areas where I've worked hard to break through, both in my party and at home. I've lived with the health system. That's why I want it to be better. I have family members who've been on Medicaid. My family is not wealthy. We don't come from anything special. We're average Americans. And so I've lived through some of these things or I've seen it, right? Those are the people who are in my mind when I think about how do we reform this to where it's doing what it functions to do and it doesn't eat up the entire federal budget, right? Because there are other things, defense, one of our biggest responsibilities as a nation, that need to be taken care of. So,
And real quick, you brought up defense. Do we spend too much, too little? Are you in favor of an increase?
I have voted, when I got to DC, there were times I definitely voted for decreases because we'd come off these, I don't think they're calling them wars, but right, the what's the word? The military actions. And I think there's an industrial complex there that makes money off of bilking, right? So I've cut in those areas, and my record shows that. Right now, though, I am concerned that our readiness is being compromised. And the reason I'm concerned is because I sit in classified briefings to talk about what's happening in the Pacific Theater. And I have generals saying, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. You decide. Because those missiles are aimed at your constituents. And when I hear that, it has definitely caused me to think, we need to change things. I wouldn't be opposed to changing what we're spending money on there. And that's also because we're also taking care of troops in a new way. I mean, we just passed the largest increase for our military men and women in 8 years, a 2.4% increase that started in January. We've also been trying, and we spend a lot of money on the VA, which obviously hasn't fixed it. So we've been changing things dramatically there. We just finally made it to where you can fire someone if you're a VA official and you cost someone their life. And that's common sense to people watching, but this is DC and it's its own world, right? So I think in terms of readiness, I'm not sure we're ready. And so I'm looking at ways that I can help.
$600 billion a year, we aren't ready.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that every dollar that is spent here is most effectively used to the purpose, which is probably to inform viewers and reach, right? I don't think it's that. So I'm not on the committee of jurisdiction, so it's not my job to comb through and find those things.
Right.
But the people who are telling me that I did a mission out of Andrews with some military folks, and I got in a 50 plus 60-year-old helicopter, and we did what we were going to do and came back. And by the time I got down, they said, yeah, basically things break weekly on this. Mm-hmm. But this is our number one answer if there's a massive issue in the Washington, D.C. region. Mm-hmm. So that's not good enough. That's not good enough when our generals say our force structure, the needs in terms of, and I won't get too specific. I'm not saying we're not ready. They're doing an amazing job. But what they're telling me is they've got this budget, they've set it out, they're training, they're moving. They can see where there will be challenges if we don't course correct. So I should be very careful. I'm not saying, they can't protect us. They can. But I want to make sure, like you said, there's a plan B and that we've got their back. and they're telling me, hey, here's an area where you can get our back.
Yeah, and really quick, I want to go back just quick questions back to the tax reform. Why did the tax cuts for individuals expire in 10 years, but the corporate tax cuts are permanent?
I think that's a failing in the bill. I am not on that committee, but I cajoled as many of the committee members as I could on that issue. There's a couple of those that I said, hey, this is stupid. Why would we do this? It feeds a terrible narrative. It's the wrong thing to do. And this is wrong for a million reasons. And the answer I got was, well, there's no way politically they'd ever let it expire. I said, that's not a good enough answer.
Yeah, that's not.
That was my response, which is why we're actually working on a bill right now. I'm hoping it'll be introduced in the next 2 weeks. That will make those permanent. So I decided not to wait for that answer. We're working on it.
My understanding is in the Senate, they had to do it that way to make the finances work out so they could avoid the filibuster, the 16 vote requirement. Is that accurate?
I'm not an expert on the Senate. I don't know.
That was my understanding.
Anything's possible in the Senate.
Yeah.
They have rules that I'm just not familiar with.
So another thing I'm curious about that, why not throw a provision into that bill requiring that the president release his tax returns?
What does that change? Does that make those permanent?
Why didn't they do that?
I don't know.
Do you think that people have a right to know?
I do. Well, let's put it this way. I think he should release them. Do they have a right to it? They elected him and he didn't give it to him. So they don't seem to care. I think he should have. I can't believe he didn't. But there's a lot of things he's done. I don't ever say never anymore. I used to say never in politics. I don't. I mean, that wouldn't have changed the tax bill. I mean, it may have made some really liberal folks very happy.
Right, yeah. Well, he wouldn't have signed it, I guess.
You know him better than I then.
No, I don't.
I never say never.
You never.
Yeah.
How about, excuse me, how about the I-5 bridge?
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you brought this up because I wouldn't have thought about. I had it all right. I do all my homework because there are things I want to talk about, but I'm actually excited about the tax bill, so my mind is going there.
There's potentially an infrastructure bill on the horizon.
Yes. Yes.
Is Clark County and this area prepared to take advantage of any shovel-ready projects?
I hope so. Right. That's a little bit more of a county / local lawmaker, but in my conversations with them, they're all moving in that direction. I feel like my job has been to make sure there's money in those types of pots federally. And I had a conversation with Elaine Chow about this. It was either December or late in November. And I've talked to our leadership about it. Talk to me about infrastructure. And you want to talk? I think that's another area where it can, if our economy's moving and distribution picks up and we see more manufacturing, we got to move stuff. And we have a very ailing old infrastructure, and both sources have said this is our number one. Elaine said this is our number one priority. As soon as taxes are off the table, this president's focus is all infrastructure. And she's pretty gun ho. She's basically. I mean, this is a bipartisan meeting we had with her, and she told one of the Democrats that nothing's off the table because we want to fix this, and we think this is a piece of economic growth. And for my part on appropriations, we're going to continue to make sure that those funding pots have the money they need. I-5 is still a huge issue, but let me take a step back. If this tolling scheme that Oregon has proposed moves through, our ability to fix the I-5 bridge changes dramatically because that was their portion. And if they're using that and then it becomes a piece in their budget somewhere, or they use it to fix other roads, or they just use it to pay for the tolling infrastructure, that's money they're not going to put into their side of the fix. It's huge. And so that scheme has got to move. This is one of the areas, and I said this, I've said it to anybody who listens. If we believe this still we need freight, people mobility and freight congestion relief, right, and safety, then we have got to convince Oregon to change their plan with regard to tolling at the state lines, period. I have tried to be very clear to the governor about this. I put the message out both to our senators. I need their help. One of the things I thought that was really interesting is Governor Inslee, a month or so ago, 2 months ago, was talking about how he has an amazing relationship with Kate Brown and Jerry Brown, right? And they're doing this whole carbon stuff, and they're like lockstep, and they have this vision. It's part of their blue wall. My first thought was, awesome. They have a good relationship. Then he needs to be honest with her and tell him we come first in his mind. Southwest Washington is part of his constituency, and we're the bigger fish in this pond. If we're going to move forward in a collaborative way, you cannot do this. It's in his power to do it. If he wants to protect us, he can push. I have crickets. I didn't know anything about this, was the letter response I got. And I thought, well, that's funny if you guys are BFFs. Crickets. That tells me how much he's concerned about our economy down here. So that needs to change. And I think our senators, who are obviously busy with a ton of stuff, also could be really helpful here with the senators in Oregon. I mean, this is all going to be a political pressure game at this point. Are we going to have enough backbone in a constructive way? You don't have to be a total jerk, but you can say, hey, we're friends. You don't have the right to pick people's pockets, and you're not only are you not engendering cooperation, you're jeopardizing an I-5 fix. I've done everything I can at this point, and I'm going to keep trying to find ways to do stuff, but it is time. I need help. We need help down here, and that's one of the things that I think. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. I mean, people in this region need to send that message to Inslee and to both our senators.
If their plan was to start collecting tolls at the state line
in the next year,
yeah. If they were going to use that portion to go to save up for an I-5 bridge or additional bridges, would you support that?
They're going to use all that money and they're going to save it up for their portion?
Yeah. From that spot.
Oh boy, I'm not going to answer. That's.
I know.
That's tough because I don't have any trust that that's what they're going to do. Because I've actually read
I don't think
previous.
They haven't said they're going to do that. I'm just
but they won't say. Here's the funny
out
thing.
Hypotheticals.
Look, let's just say it this way: if we can, and I know our local lawmakers are working on this pretty intensely. And they've been working and reaching out to their Oregon counterparts. And there are some who are interested. This dumb tolling scheme they put together really screws that up. But if they came to the table in good faith and said, this is our plan, we want to cooperate, we want to get this built, I think we can put everything on the table and talk about it. I'm not afraid to take that back to my constituents and ask them what they think. If they think it's a good idea, we move forward. That's not a problem. I've even thrown out, there's so many easier solutions. If we did a bus rapid transit that hooked into their light rail, we could get all that transit money. We could get that extra lane. But you know why we didn't get that? Because Oregon said no dice. And we didn't have the support of our governor or our senators to say, nope, we're going to hold firm here. We could be moving on that already, but they wouldn't do it because there's an ideological component that says we have to have light rail here. That's got to change. Fundamentally, that's got to change. But that's not going to change if they keep looking over their shoulder and say, the Democrat liberals in their area really want what we're doing, but they're not going to come out and say it. So we can just keep pushing. We can keep pushing. And I bet you, I would love to hear the governor refute this. That maybe they do want to put it in place, and maybe they will use some of those tolls, and maybe that's how they want to still, get a light rail in here. I want to hear him say that that's not okay. I'm not convinced that he's not okay with that because of his silence. And as a region, again, I've said it. I tell people this in D.C. all the time. They think I'm a flaming moderate. It's so funny because I come home and I'm like, you don't understand Washington State at all. I mean, they really do. They're like, oh, yeah, she's part of the Republican conference, but, well, kind of squishy. And I laugh and I'm like, at home, I've got horns. I don't mean according to the constituents. I mean according to the political class. But I really feel like this area is so independent-minded that if it's a common sense solution and it requires us all to give a little, I don't think people will be opposed if it means, hey, safety, better commute time. They're really common sense people. So I feel like we have compromise to give, but I'm done allowing us to be walked on. We will not do that. And they're not, I feel like on this tolling thing, It's like the last straw in my mind.
So did the two states, is there any way the federal government can facilitate the states getting together?
I'll look into that. I have I've been careful because I haven't wanted to be the voice from on high that dictates what
Right.
this looks like.
Yeah, understandable, but
But-
let's face it, we need help. We need guidance.
That's a great.
These two
I
states.
I think, baby, that's a great idea. When I got to DC, the administration and the transportation secretary said to me point blank, "You will have this. It will be a light rail. This is our priority." It wasn't, "Hey, welcome. You're the voice for 1 million people in your region. What would they like? How can they be part of this?" It was, sit down, be quiet. This is what you're going to get. So you can understand why I've tried to not do that. But Elaine Chow's not like that, and maybe I'm totally open to that. That's not a bad idea at all.
So if the current administration isn't like that, would they go along with any solution forged by the two states, or would they follow the local
That's
preference?
tough. I think Elaine is from my experience with her, I should say Secretary Chow. She's a woman with an impressive title. I should use it. I would say that the secretary is very common sense.
Mm-hmm.
My experience with her, and you can ask Democrats who work with her. She just wants to get the job done, and she gets to work on infrastructure, which tends to not be partisan. So she's all about putting her shoulder to the wheel, and I think she would want to be helpful. I think she'd want to facilitate. And I don't know Trump personally, but my observation is he's a businessman. Let's get it done, right? Why not? I don't foresee any ideological problems that would cause us not to move forward. Not speaking for them, but that's my observation. Thanks for bringing that up. There's one other thing I wanted to bring up. Well, there's two things. I don't know. Do you want to keep going, or should I bring up a couple stuff?
Go ahead.
One has to do with public lands. Oh my heavens! I knew that the Trump
We've been
administration.
hearing a bit about that.
Just a scotch. I knew that the Trump administration would usher in a new era. I didn't know what that era would look like. I'm starting to learn that it means partisan attacks from people from outside groups, and I want to set the record straight on that one. Because I'm really, I talk about healthcare. Our public lands is another area where I'm really passionate. I grew up here. We fished and hunted and camped and probably did things we weren't supposed to on our federal lands, right? That's just growing up here. That's what you do. This is it's part of our identity. And to hear them saying there's a vote, and Jamie's a swing vote, she's going to gut, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I only heard a couple of them, but I know they were widespread. I think it was TV and radio because I got calls. Oh, man, I just had to smile and shake my head and think, oh, they're really gunning for this. Because if you look at my record, everything I've done has been to better manage, whether it's our forests or provide more access to the public. Whether it's fighting for funding with regard to public trails. I got an award from a more environmental-minded group for protecting public trails. It was kind of a fun thing for me. Or standing with sportsmen when they're hunting. Really prime hunting areas have been threatened. Or even in Skamania County, which is beleaguered, to say the least. We brokered a deal that both enhanced Pacific Crest Trail, but also held their taxable base whole. So, I can point to, I brought out Obama administration officials, whether it's Fish and Wildlife or Chief Forester, to say, this is how we need to change this. I've been working with them pretty hand in glove to try and rehab our federal forests and keep them, but also protect our monuments. So there's no vote in Congress, at least that I can find. There's no deciding option to gut our national monument, and if there were, I'd vote no. So it's kind of political hyperbole, and I wanted to address that just because I felt like that came out of left field.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what role did you or
Nothing.
House play in that?
Nothing. And there isn't a vote to do that.
Right.
That was I
that
actually
just
felt
up to the Interior Department and the administration?
well, we don't have anything in our area. I know there was
Right.
I think this group is part of the group that didn't want the Trump administration to do a proclamation over land in Utah.
Right.
But it's land, and I did go look at it because I thought, is there anything even around us that this is in question? Mm-hmm. And that's how I kind of uncovered this. The land's still public land. Nothing was sold to the highest bidder. Right. Agree or disagree. I know that I did talk to some of the local representatives, and they're passionate about, so they wanted Trump to do this. Mm-hmm. So he was essentially listening to the elected representatives in Utah. But conversely, if he had a question, which I don't think he would look, because we love our monuments, we're not trying to do anything with them, then I hope he'd listen to us, and I'd say we need to protect them. So it's kind of out of there.
Listening to the populace and to elections, what are your thoughts about the Attorney General's crackdown on states that have legalized marijuana?
Well, I think the only solution that we're really going to come to here, or that we should come to, is federal legislation that, and I'm not saying where I'd vote on this one. This one's tough because, there's a conflict between federal law and state law.
Right.
So what I believe is the public, our public here, business owners here, shouldn't be going, gee, what's going to happen when a new administration or a new AG gets in there? That's ridiculous. This swinging back and forth.
Sure.
I'm committed to addressing that. Now, do I think we should...
Wouldn't that lean towards states' rights? If the state approves it, they should...
This is one I'm searching out. Yeah. I'm not convinced. Because for several reasons. So we have this horrific opioid epidemic taking place. You want to talk about substance abuse and mental health challenges. I mean, that's an area we've put over $3 billion in funding alone on substance abuse and mental health, with drug courts and suicide hotlines and youth prevention. I mean, we've been plowing here, and we're just playing catch up. And as I've met with, like Cowlitz County Sheriff, and I've had opioid roundtables here, I've met with addicts, former or recovering addicts, everyone, school drug counselors, police officers, right, paramedics. I talked to them into a one. They say this is the most hurtful thing we could have done.
I'm sorry, what
legalizing marijuana recreationally. Mm-hmm. Medical marijuana is a different subject, totally different, right? I think that we've seen some medicinal benefits, and that can be moved forward. But on the recreational side, I sat next to an addict at a roundtable, I think it was last summer, and we were talking about what can I do? How can I help? We're talking about naloxone and training for providers and getting it at its root. And he said, that's the stupidest thing. It was his words. That's the stupidest thing we ever could have done. That's a gateway drug. Mm-hmm. We did a hearing in Labor H on opioids middle of last year, and where there was a dad there testifying about his son was 30 or 26 when he died of an overdose, and I asked him this. I just said, look, our state has legalized this. My district didn't, although there have been businesses that have moved forward lawfully. And what do you think about that? I didn't want to lead him, but I put it in his lap, and he said, I can't say, whether that led to my son's overdose. I think it was an opioid overdose. He said, but I will tell you that was the first drug he tried when he was 15 or a teenager.
So if you believe in the gateway principle, then a lot of people believe that alcohol is a gateway.
I'm learning. So I'm telling you what I'm learning. I'm not an expert.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about the fact that alcohol is a gateway drug as well?
Well, in terms of alcoholism?
No, just in terms of people who get addicted to marijuana or opioids or heroin, or normally use alcohol as well.
Well, I'll say for young people, I think all of it should be off limits.
Sure.
And the message that we're sending or have sent, alcohol is ridiculously tightly regulated, and the federal government did have a prohibition on it, right? And it
didn't go very well.
Right? And it moved back.
Yeah.
I think the debate that needs to take place on the marijuana side. we need to move forward. We can't just sit here
Would
and
you
pretend
support
like.
additional research? Because now
Absolutely.
research
That's
is
part of
all
our
locked
problem
up
is we don't have the information. At that same roundtable, Robert Wood Johnson's foundation was there, and because I put there was doctors, their parents, and this think tank, and I said, what do you know? Show me some numbers. And she said, we literally don't know. We're doing research on this right now and we have a lot of data on alcohol and how to, and even with regard to advertising and when it can be advertised and where it can be and, blah, 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 blah. We have none of that. It's the Wild West with regard to marijuana. And my fear is that and here's the other thing. I'll drink, right? I'll have a glass of wine. We have some amazing wineries, some awesome craft brewers, which, by the way, are seeing a awesome tax reduction in their businesses. So these small craft brewers in Southwest Washington are going to be growing as a result of this tax bill. But anyway.
And therefore AT&T needed a tax break? That doesn't seem to make sense.
I don't like picking in winners and losers in the tax code. So what we did is we closed crazy loopholes. But I'm not going to then go to one business and say, well, you were successful and you were not. You don't take advantage of this. You can. I mean, that was the whole point. Get it on a postcard. You shouldn't have to need to hire an accountant to do your taxes. Well, if you're a company. But that was the point. I'm not picking winners and losers. I just want it to be fair. And if they happen to be successful, awesome. Hire more freaking people. Grow some stuff here.
And that's why AT&T laid off 2,000 people in December.
I am
after
not
the
an
bill passed.
AT&T representative, right? I'm a representative of the people here, and there are people here who work for AT&T, and some of the big corporations and the small ones. I want to make it as fair as I can for all of them. Where was I? I was right on the opioid. Alcohol. No, I will have a drink, right? It was Jesus' first miracle. It was wine at a wedding. It wasn't pot at a wedding. Lived there. Yeah, right. I guess it wasn't specified. And I am a product of the "don't do drugs" message in school, right? I remember it as a high school athlete at Prairie. Took it very seriously. You sign a code, right? You're not going to drink. You're not going to do marijuana. You're not going to do these things. And I bought it. I believed it. And who knows? I think I certainly can look at extended family.
But I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it.
For a second. But at the same time, were there kids in high school who were using marijuana, even though it was illegal?
Yeah, there were.
Yeah, so,
but they
I
also
think
were.
That's part of the question about prohibition. Is it really effective?
Yeah. However, we didn't, as a society, tell young people, "Well, just wait till you're 21 and you can go get high." Sure. In fact, we said it was worse. The other thing we see is the impact on the developing brain, and that's where the research is in. The stuff I've seen is terrifying. The impact on a mom who's pregnant is terrifying, right? Of smoking marijuana. Sure. And research also says that specifically a young man, I can't speak to this personally, but they're not done developing when they turn 18. Their brain is not done developing when they turn 18. And so the impact of a hallucinogenic drug.
Sure. Yeah, and those are valid points. And I think it would have been beneficial if the federal government had allowed and promoted research on this for decades. We should have a lot more information now than we do.
Hindsight is 20/20. I wasn't there, but I don't disagree. I do think, though, that the people who pushed it at the state level pushed it prematurely because they saw an opportunity, and they went for it. I don't know that was the right. So now the federal government has to come back and say, "Oh, I guess we need to fix to your standards." I love our initiative process because it allows people to voice their own ideas. That doesn't mean it's perfect, right? And what we saw written, I just know the cleanup from what was written in terms of how to regulate it, what to do with it, has been very difficult. I think it would have been nice, and I don't know, maybe they have been trying to educate. Maybe there was a whole education campaign that they did before that. But you're right. I think right now, where we are, this is the current circumstances. We need more research. Absolutely.
So to go back to the beginning of this, if a bill came before the House that said to make marijuana legal nationally, recreational.
I don't know that I would support it.
Okay.
I don't know.
But you don't know if you would
No.
vote against it.
I don't. I'm not going to pretend like I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's that helpful. It may not be hurtful. Here's the other thing, especially if you're an adult and this is probably where people would listen and say, well, I'm a successful business person. This doesn't hurt. This is something I do recreationally. And it's in a very safe and contained way. And, I drink or I'll have a cigar, right? Those aren't illegal. I realize that's a valid argument. But then I still have to deal with young people who are growing into this. And my message to them is, you know what? You're not competing in Battleground or in Camas for jobs. You're competing on a global stage. I don't even know that my generation was, but they certainly are. And it may not hurt you, but is that going to help you? I mean, you got China and India. You've got underdeveloped countries who are fighting for our opportunities. And we're competing on that. It's funny, I saw a study, there was a documentary, this was a couple years ago, on young people in our schools, and we're rated in terms of confidence, or we were at near the top. In terms of actual achievement, we were behind Singapore. And so maybe it won't hurt them. I pray it won't. I pray that's all it ever is. But I don't know that it's going to help them. And I guess that's my job. My job is help.
So it's I frequently see the notion discussed of laws that Congress passes not applying to people who are in Congress. Is that true?
Not that I've found, because I think that's ridiculous. I mean, I think one of the first bills I signed that I got hassled over by my colleagues was it the STOP Act? Was that the acronym? It was the insider trading, don't, right?
As a result of the 60 Minutes speech.
I think I co-sponsored it before that.
Oh.
I think it was Brian Baird's bill. Right? Wasn't it Brian's bill? And so it was around. Mm-hmm. And I got dinged on it in D.C. Come to find out, it was just more about reporting. It's still illegal. It was illegal to insider trade, still illegal to insider trade. But that made it easier to report so that it's not just trust me, let me, verify. But where I see those things, I'll take that action because I don't think it's appropriate. But I don't find a lot of those. I mean, people talk about, everything from Obamacare to what do you pay Social Security, and the answer is yes on all that. But I'm always open. If somebody finds something, I think we should be under the same laws. But to my knowledge, I am. I should look. There was one other thing. Oh, but I'll let you go because it wasn't policy.
I do have another question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Several months ago, there was a horrific mass shooting in Las Vegas.
There was one 2 days ago.
Yeah, as well. But after Vegas in particular, there was pretty widespread interest in near unanimous public opinion on banning bump stocks. Mm-hmm. Has Congress taken any action? Even in Congress, there was much talk at the time about this should be easy to do, and then it just went away.
Well, what we did was, and I'm still waiting on this response, I was allowing the ATF to fix it because I don't necessarily want to get into the place. It's illegal to have an automatic weapon, and I mean that's law. That's federal law. I really wanted ATF to make this fix because I want them to understand that if something, a device allows that enhancement to become an automatic weapon, then the device is essentially allowing it. And I wanted them to do it because I felt like it was their mistake, but ultimately they need to enforce it. So they need to see it that way. And so I did a letter to them that they still haven't responded to, asking them to move forward there. That was 3 months ago now, so I'm not opposed to doing that because I think it keeps the nature and the spirit of the law. I know that not everybody loves that.
You're not opposed to doing what?
Putting bump stocks on that same playing field is banned is part of an automatic weapon.
As having an actual bill to that effect.
I don't know that a bill's going to do it. There's a lot.
Well, you raise a good point that still they would need to be enforced.
and I just think it's appropriate. Like, then we're getting into, I don't want to be the arbiters at every level on every enforcement, right? That we set the law. Automatic weapons are illegal. You can't do this. So the regulating agency should be regulating it that way. But I'm glad you actually brought that up, because I think we need to do follow-up.
As far as I'm aware, since then, the only thing Congress has done regarding gun control or gun rights is the concealed carry reciprocity.
Wasn't the only thing, but that was definitely a big one. We further enhanced and funded the National Criminal Innocent Background Check System, which, if it had been in place, see, I think you can't do just one thing, and I support the concealed carry reciprocity. So I should say that.
And why is that? So because Washington has fairly strict laws, a lot of other states
we don't
for concealed carry.
I mean, I guess I should say, what is your definition?
Okay, well, let's say there are some states that have looser concealed carry.
Well, so
why should
I'll
somebody
tell you
from
why.
that state
Yeah,
be allowed
absolutely.
to carry here?
So that's what people keep saying, but it's actually almost the reverse for the most of my population, right? People who go get their fingerprints, they're not felons. And that's the point of this bill. If you're a law-abiding citizen and you want to protect your family, you have the right to do it. I want to help you do that. If you're a felon, or if you're going to break the laws of another state, you don't have the right to carry. That's what this bill says. It's very simple. There's been a lot of misinformation about it. And I supported that before. I mean, I didn't feel comfortable saying, well, I'm going to pick and choose politically. I mean, I fundamentally believe in the right, so I'm sticking with it. But you actually, at the state line, can't carry into Oregon. So if you work in Oregon, if you go to church in Oregon, if you shop in Oregon, which a lot of people do. So at Christmas time at a mall, we've actually had this happen at Clackamas Mall. And people will say there was someone there who was carrying, I don't know if it was Oregon or Washington, who knows. But that may have helped in what could have been a bad situation.
So
but my
therefore, we
point
should
is,
have more people carrying.
no,
that?
my point is if you're going with your family and you're a law-abiding citizen and you've gone to the Clark County Sheriff's Office, you've done your fingerprints, you've proven you're not a criminal, you don't have to take a class, right? Oregon, I think you have to do a live sit-in class is the difference. So theirs is actually more stringent than ours. So this would allow people in my district who travel into Oregon to protect their families. That was why I did it. I definitely, I mean, if, you know, the thing that went with that I think is critical is we have a state-run system that the feds fund. In fact, I supported it a few years ago, and my primary opponent beat the crap out of me for supporting it, the National Criminal Innocent Background Check. If that had been funded in Virginia at the time, the worst shooting was Virginia Tech, they would have flagged that guy. The Texas one that just happened, right? That would have flagged him. Both of those people had demonstrated he wasn't the guy in Texas wasn't allowed to have a gun, and they didn't check, right? So I could have had a lot of laws on the books, but they weren't following it. So with the concealed carry reciprocity, we also put in funding to make sure that doesn't happen. I also think there's more that needs to be done, though, and I've been an advocate for this consistently. You know, I've urged my own leadership to bring up, there's a bill, some people talked about the no-fly list, but a more comprehensive list is the terror watch list. If that's 400, 500,000 people, it's a huge list. And if you've even been on it in the last 5 years, if you go to purchase a firearm, you get dinged. And law enforcement, so this is also protecting your rights within the Constitution too, which is big here. You get dinged and law enforcement has 3 days. I mean, you could change that time frame, but my proposal is that 3 days and they can intervene. Wait, this person, there's probable cause, Judge, can we stop this? That's protecting the Constitution and keeping more people safe. That would have flagged the shooter in Orlando, right? And I also think the bigger piece here, quite frankly, because so that's dealing with terrorists, that's dealing with adults or people who have dealt with, you know, right? But, you know, the other piece here, which is growing, is young people, right? It's young people in schools. And I think the bigger piece there, in my view, is the mental health piece. If you look at some of these young people who have gone into schools and hurt people, most have had someone say, oh, there's something wrong here. Oh, there's a problem. But most will also then say, but we didn't know what to do. There was nowhere to refer him. There was no one to send him to. That's why I took real issue with the mental health op-ed that you all did. I felt like it wasn't researched at all. A couple months ago, it said, and that was over a simple letter that I was trying to get the Trump administration to put something in their budget. But if you looked at my record, I supported, in the last 2 years, we've supported the largest couple bills that were the largest mental health overhauls of our nation in decades. Whether it was youth suicide prevention, whether it was drug courts or mental health, or the suicide lifelines, or first responder training, or the biggest one in my mind is workforce development. It's putting actual money into workforce development because we don't have enough mental health providers in communities, period. I also did a bill with Representative Kilmer to increase the number of inpatient beds for communities.
And did those pass?
2 of them did. They were signed into law. Huge. And those were in law when that op-ed ran. We also put money into substance abuse mental health as an appropriator that dealt with everything from putting an increase in drug courts, in mental health courts, because I think in talking about substance abuse, talking about young people, I don't want them going straight into right now our jails are our mental health system. That's woefully inadequate. So when someone at a high school counselor says, hey, we got a problem, we need to be able to send these young people somewhere. We're dealing with this in some of our communities right now, and postpartum is another piece in there we've been putting more funding into, because I think that's, unfortunately, we haven't been seeing as much of that, but there are still issues there as well. I think when you talk about gun violence, and you talk about people who, it's generally either a terrorist or someone, San Bernardino, or someone who has a mental health issue. And oftentimes people say, God, there was something weird. But we have to increase that. We have to do better. And I have been laboring in that field. I do all my notes, and then I get in the car and I'm like, I didn't mention this.
I sneak one more in.
Yeah.
How many times have you met with the public, personally, and not on the phone?
Oh, almost daily. I do it. It's a huge part of my job.
You do onesies and twosies?
No, I do groups.
Oh, you do large groups?
I do groups. I do small groups. I do onesies and twosies. I do fivesies. It's funny because right now most of the people I meet with are political opponents. And I don't mean like running against me. I mean, yay, since the change in administration. It was a marked change. Like, it's probably 8-1. People who come in have real grievances or concerns. Not necessarily with me, but just the system, what's happening, what I am or am not doing about it. But I think that's only going to continue. That's going to increase, and I think I'm going to continue to meet with people in live telephone town halls, in live public town halls, in group meetings and roundtables. I think that's just the way it goes. That's his job. I probably could give you some numbers. It's up in the. I can't give you numbers per week, but informal town halls.
I was just wondering, based on the rancor that's kind of built into everything these days, that the big audience kinds of events can get a little hairy at times.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say that. So I guess for me, the way I look at it is what's going to be the most effective, because I'm not interested in feeding. I don't want to feed the beast. I don't feed it in DC. I'm not. And that's part of the reason I think people look at me a little differently. I didn't go to town. I wasn't a hardcore partisan on Obama. When he did stuff I agree with, I supported it. When he didn't, I opposed it. And I'm taking the exact same track with Trump. And I think what facilitates that? What facilitates that conversation at home? I have had a tremendous success with the telephone town halls. I have. I had.
So people call in on those.
Well, we call out everybody.
Okay, but then how do you choose the questions? Which questions?
Write down a list. In fact, if you listened to my one the other night, I think the first or second person screamed at me for a good. I just waited for her to take a breath before I jumped in, and it was a lot of tax stuff. Some of the points you raised.
Oh, what kind of reaction have you gotten regarding the tax bill?
It's actually been really positive. I feel like the strongest negative reaction I've gotten was from the paper.
Well, then do you not read your Twitter feed?
I don't spend a lot of time on my social media. I don't read a lot of comments. I don't.
When you
I don't read Trump's
when
comments
you
either.
tweeted out, or someone on your staff had tweeted out.
No, we did. We released.
Okay.
I released stuff.
Yeah, and
but I don't always go back and read the feedback.
Right, and when you tweeted out that you were excited about the tax cuts for individuals, and I looked at one sample on there. It was 96 out of. I looked at 100 responses.
Yeah.
96 were opposed and were
Probably.
criticizing.
Do you think? I mean,
that's not scientific by any stretch. But I'm
no.
wondering.
I wouldn't be in the
Are
seat
you
if that was
aware
scientific.
of that kind of feedback?
So I will tell you, I take very seriously any feedback that is directed at me in my office. Every email, every phone call, every meeting. And in fact, I comb over and I try. And it's also not scientific because you don't know who's instigated to actually respond.
Right.
But
Or who's organized
anybody
the campaign.
anybody who gets a hold of me, I look at that because that's a formal. It's not social media for me is a way to send information out, but I don't always read. I certainly don't read. I mean, I found that I'm going to live longer if I don't read Twitter, right? But anybody who emails me or calls me, and even in that, I've had a majority of positive, or at the very least, people have begun to change, right? So maybe it's only the people who are upset about it who are calling in, but it's really hard to argue with things that we're already seeing happen. So time will tell on that. I'm not saying everybody who gets a hold of me loves it, but I also think, and then what I just shared, most of the people who are getting a hold of me right now are people who are opposed to the Trump administration. So a lot of what I'm dealing with, and it's funny because I have to take a step back sometimes and think, where is a majority of my district? Where are people generally? That's sometimes a little bit harder to find out because, if a group's organizing, that's who you're going to hear from primarily. And you could stop and think, that's it, everybody's in this one box. But I think the way I have tried to filter that is meeting with people, talking with people, touring things, getting out, not always reading what's in the media.
In a way,
it's not a perfect
has
science.
Trump made it more difficult to be a Republican now? And
No. I actually am enjoying having a Republican administration who cares about the economy and deficits. And I had a pretty big disagreement with him on healthcare.
But he cares about deficits?
I should say, working with an administration who generally agrees with us. There are some areas with him I don't agree with. But no, are you kidding me? Waters of the U.S. is repealed, right? We AHPs in our state are going to be protected. That's small business healthcare plans. I like where he's at on foreign policy. I want China to know we're not just going to be passive. We're not going to be the Southwest Washington to their Portland bullying, right? I like that. I feel more secure. There are things I disagree with him about.
So given that, let's say if he were up for re-election this year, would you vote for him? And I believe
that's tough.
Last time you said you were going to vote for Paul Ryan, I believe.
I did.
You wrote in Paul
and
Ryan.
That was a lot of fun.
Would you vote for Trump if it were up this November?
I don't know. His record so far, in terms of policy, I have appreciated. I don't agree with everything. I mean, the drilling is a great example. I had to send him a letter last week to say, hey, don't do that off our coast. We want the same exemption as Florida.
Yeah.
I think that'll continue. That's fine. I would do that with any administration. But I think, I don't know. I think so, but I don't know. Last time for me, he was untested, and all I saw were character problems. And I still believe that character does mean something in terms of leadership. It's funny, people have a hard time understanding, I shouldn't say understanding, agreeing we are separated powers constitutionally. I actually have no authority over him, into him. He's been given specific authority, unless he breaks the law. Constitutionally, treason, high crimes, okay, then I'm constitutionally engaged, which is why, right. So, but otherwise I have to operate in my sphere. As a citizen, however, I get to cast my vote or not cast my vote for him based on whether I think he should be the leader. I didn't last time. I'm going to give him the full term before I make that decision on this.
Right, and that's a long way off. And but you mentioned that character does matter.
To me personally, I think it's huge.
Anything in the past year changed your opinion of his character? Or?
It's funny because, back to the will of the voter, I don't think anybody is surprised by things that come up right now with regard to his character. I think they all saw it before, right? Is anybody surprised at anything they've seen recently? Well, no, because we knew in the last year and the 7 years before that what types of things we saw happen. So why would anybody be surprised more recently? The thing that I come back to, though, is my district knew those things and still chose him to be the president of the United States. And I have a constitutional responsibility to my bosses here to respect their wishes. So I am both my own person with regard to my vote when it comes to president, but as a member of Congress, they knew what he was like, and they still sent him. And so I'm not going to waste
Even
time.
though he lost the popular vote nationally.
Yeah. But he didn't hear.
No.
That's fundamentally it. Mm-hmm. And people see their livelihoods returning. They see financial prosperity coming. They see him leaving them alone to a degree, right? And that's, again, more independent-minded in our district.
You mean unless you vote in favor of marijuana?
I was talking about him. Are you talking about me?
No, the administration.
Yeah,
You say
that's an area.
Yeah,
but that's not. I'm gonna venture that's not a majority of what the families in my district are focused on. They're focused on getting up, getting to work, making that paycheck, maybe planning and having the money to do a vacation, picking the school that they want their kids to go through, affording their health insurance, right? That's what they're really focused on. And I think they believe that he's willing to cut through the bull. That's probably as firm as I ever get, right? And they like that. And I think they're going to see some of those benefits. I'm not sensing a change from them. But I never say never anymore. It's going to be a lot more fluid, and I think it's going to take more conversations, more listening. You know what's so fascinating for me? My Democrat counties, who I've worked my tail off to win their support, right? I've been very proud. I mean, I won in the 49th in the last go-around. That was a lot of hard work on my part. I mean, I am honored by that, hugely honored by that. He won my Democrat counties. Unpack that. So, I guess the title is representative is the job, but it's also it means you have to understand where people are coming from the best of your ability. It's not a perfect science.
Are you happy with his response to the Russian intervention in the election? When you believe the intelligence community when they say with certainty that there was interference in our electoral process?
I don't think there was a question that there was interference. And it's a huge problem.
But now there's been no response by the administration on that.
So, so I'm going to go with me on a little bit of a journey here. But he had nothing to, from the administration perspective, his office was not running the show. They didn't allow that. You know whose office allowed that? Obama. And he knew about it.
Allowed.
That intervention took place.
What are your thoughts on Trump's reaction to that?
I heard he described recently as Donald Trump being the first president who has not responded when our country was attacked in a significant way.
That's a political misstatement. You know who didn't respond when the Russians interfered with our election and our economy? The Obama administration. Those intelligence officials told him during the election this was happening. Both on the economic side, through NGOs they were funding to try and undermine the free market system because they believe in communism, but also to undermine the elections. And you know what? He didn't do anything about it.
Okay, but what are your thoughts about Trump's
I have not followed. Let's just put it this way. His response is not my concern. My concern is that Congress is delving deep into that interference. wherever that information leads us, we act on it.
As a result, the
Guilty,
special counsel-
not guilty, whatever.
Uh-huh.
That's my responsibility. If we find something illegal happened, that's where that separation of powers changes. Then I have a responsibility. So I know people on the liberal side are like, you need to get out there and say everything you can. Actually, I think I need to stay out of the opinion side of it, and I need to follow where the facts lead, which means protecting what's happening, which means getting information to the public. They should know, and we act. If that trail leads, but this is the trade-off. If that trail leads to he didn't do anything wrong, it's gonna make a lot of liberals mad. But that's true too. Maybe he did,
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
Wherever it goes.
Because of that, don't you think we'd be better off as a country if a year ago if he had said, this sounds very serious, by all means let's fully investigate and let's find out what happened. I'm confident that me, my family, my administration, or my campaign were not involved, but let's find out what happened.
So why?
Instead of his constant harping.
So I'm not going to run for president of the United States, right? But if I were the president of the United States, I would handle that very differently. Ridiculously differently.
Than what he did?
I think so. Yeah, but I would handle a whole lot differently. The people didn't choose me, they chose him. In addition, who cares what a candidate, I shouldn't say it that way. What a candidate says, a candidate is saying as a candidate. Clinton didn't say that as a candidate. She could have said the same thing, because for all we knew, it was on her behalf, right? We didn't know.
Well,
Why
yes,
didn't she say that?
But a lot of this, at least for the public, did not come out until after the election.
Because the Obama administration sat on it.
Right, but
that's
as
why I'm
far
saying
as
people say
public
there's this
response,
I think he should, I would handle it differently. I totally would. But I'm a totally different person, right? I've had different life experiences. This is how he does his life. This is how he's handling it. I'm not surprised. But in my mind, the real story, and as someone who's not been a hardcore partisan, I think you can look at the facts. You know who should have been outraged, who should have thrown down, who should have been flipping out, is the commander-in-chief when we were attacked. When he found out we were attacked, he should have done something. He did nothing. So I think that's really, I know it's more exciting to harp on Trump, but the real story, the real news, the real outrage should be the guy who was in charge of the ship at the time. Let it ride, and it happened. And now we get. That has caused questions of the integrity of the election for every American, and that's what we're trying to get to the bottom of, right? But talk about, he really could have upended it at that point, and he chose not to. So what do you expect this president to say? I would expect him to say and do things that are in line with what he's demonstrated with regard to how he operates. That's neither here nor there for me. Give me the facts.
Great. Well, Jamie, thank you very much. Thanks
this was
for
fun.
giving us so much time.
I appreciate it.